All right, so we finished up EOW class, day 2 of it. It was an amazing class, amazing experience. Thank you so much for the class. Thanks for coming to Iowa City.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for participating. You did awesome.
Well, thank you. It was very strenuous. After yesterday, I felt like I'd been beaten up all day, and so.
Well, anything worth having is earned, you know. So I want the experience to be powerful, and I want the experience to be meaningful, and I think you guys need to struggle safely,
right?
You know, when you do that. So yeah.
All right, well, we'll get into questions.
Okay.
Why should a person seek out training with an edged weapon, with a knife? Why should they seek it out?
Well, so as we saw in the course, my coursework as I presented with edged weapons overviews from the perspective of defending against an edged weapon and using an edged weapon. So I'll look at both sides of the coin. This is a weapons-based world that we live in, and more often than not, especially these days, even in not what we consider a schoolyard fight, but maybe casual violence, you know, with guys calling each other out in bars, and, you know, historically, you know, affairs of honor with men were settled with their fists. Well, more and more often these days, there's a second guy stepping in, somebody's pulling a knife, there's a gun in place. So that is the reality of the world that we live in. So I think training against probably the most prolific weapon that you're going to run into, you know, learning how to deal with that. Knives are the most prolific weapon, they're the most readily available. And then if you need to, being able to take the most prolific and the most available weapon and use it to defend yourself, I think that's a good thing, and I think it fits in overall. I don't necessarily focus my life on edged weapons, but I think having, much like groundwork and grappling, I think being competent in that area, I think that's incredibly important for a student overall, holistically, of self-defense.
Okay, thank you. What do you recommend carrying? What do you carry?
Well, so I carry a firearm, and the firearm is the great equalizer. I think people who can legally do so should carry firearms. I encourage people to carry firearms, be confident with firearms, be safe with firearms. A knife is probably you know, something that augments a firearm well. It's not a reliable physiological stopper. I like pepper spray for preemptive use, for things that you know, probably you wouldn't want to induce a lot of injury on someone, you know, like, you know, a person harassing a woman, you know, that, and it's right at the point maybe of getting physical. I think pepper spray right at that moment can be a real good bridge into an escape for that woman, or possibly into a firearm. So, you know, I like a trinity kind of a defensive firearm, a blade, and a small can of pepper spray. Those three things I think work real well with each other.
Okay. For somebody that wants to be well prepared to defend their family and themselves, is there any books out there you would recommend?
The one, honestly, that I would recommend more than any other would probably be Jeff Cooper's Principles of Personal Defense. I think that book, you know, is kind of like the modern equivalent of Musashi's Book of Five Rings. I think any person that takes that, because those are big 10,000-foot view concepts of self-defense.
Right.
And I think that book, probably more than any other, is the one I would recommend to read and to refer to and to read again 5 years later after you've done training, and you can really understand, you know, the meaning of all those concepts that Cooper lays out. That would be the one I would recommend most.
Okay, thank you. What do you recommend for someone that wants to do combatives, but they can't afford a year's membership to a jiu-jitsu gym or a boxing gym?
So people like me usually have a community that surrounds them, and usually that community have very accessible, mostly free training groups. So, for example, you did Edged Weapons Overview this weekend, and Jason talked about, you know, there's a greater Shiv Works community of small training groups led by people like him that take alumni like you and give you the opportunity to train on a regular basis. So that's, you know, eminently more affordable, okay, than a monthly $150, BJJ or MMA gym membership. And I think for somebody in a budget, when you go to somebody like me and establish a base and you tap in to the larger community, we want people to be successful, and we want to be competent, and we want to do regular sustainment outside of the, once or twice a year we come to your community. So tapping into a national instructors training community, I think, is a really good way to for a guy to do sustainment and get better.
Okay, all right. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with family members that don't have any interest in doing any sort of personal defense, any personal protection?
So I think the best thing to do with a family member, okay, that isn't interested in listening to what you have to say about self-defense, is talking them into coming to a course with you as someone who is observing, not participating.
Okay.
Because what it allows them to do is watch other people do what you do, kind of get a feel for the kind of people that share the same interests that you do. And a lot of times our family members, they'll listen. If they hear the exact same message from someone else that you've been telling them,
right,
they'll actually listen.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've had that happen quite a bit, and I've had several of my people that have come in and brought their spouses with them. And what their spouse will do, they'll enroll them for like the first 4 hours, the management
okay,
contacts portion. And I, charge a nominal fee for that. So, a husband or a wife will come along and do the first 2 hours of muck. Sure. And then watch the spouse do the rest of the training and get interested and observe. And it's a good kind of feeder band to
sure,
get non-interested people more interested in self-defense.
Right.
So I think just surrounding that, or putting them in a situation where they can get positive exposure to the community that you're involved in, I think that's a great way of doing it. I think that's better than you just talking to them,
right,
or coming up with a particular tactic or strategy for talking to a family member. Let somebody else do it.
Right, absolutely. Last question. So as a teacher, I see these students every year graduate and then go off to college, and they, in my mind, have no idea about the violence that could be facing them at those colleges. And so if you had just like 1 hour to talk to these kids and talk about how to deal with that violence that could be faced by them, what would you tell them?
I would probably pull a ton of real-world footage, dash cam footage, events, things that happen, stories, and I'd show them, hey, this happens. Okay, it's not just me trying to scare you. And then I'd really talk to them about, enhancing their awareness, probably through the muck paradigm, how they not only deal with strangers, but in a lot of college settings, the assault comes from someone they do know. Right? So, particularly for young ladies, working them in situations where it's a social setting, or maybe there's, some kind of borderline romantic interest, and now that at that moment that starts to go awry, I'd probably, simulate put some scenarios, do some simulations where, they have to just make a decision to reject that person and get up versus go along with it or wait till it's too late. I think some good simulation training, because and if you make it interactive and you get the kids engaged versus just talking to them, they'll have fun with it. Right. And I think that's a better learning modality for people. It's more interesting.
Right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for
Trevor,
your time.
Thanks
for the class.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Man, I enjoyed having you in class, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you
very much.
It.